Hello out there. This is Pamela Fagan Hutchins, and you have found me on the Next Chapter podcast, which is the successor in interest to Wine, Women, and Writing, Crime and Wine, all the podcasts I've done. But this is my 152nd episode, and I am super excited to be back in the saddle after 2 years off while I gallivanted around Europe. So here we go. Let's knock the rust off together. Today, I'm welcoming a guest from the great state of Wyoming. He is located 2 hours south of me at the top of Casper Mountain, where I am about 2,000 feet lower, 6,000 feet up on the Bighorn Mountains. So we're having the mountain show today. And my guest is Kevin Christensen. Kevin is a U.S. House of Representatives candidate. See, I've already messed up here and a longtime Wyomingite has a lot of great stories to tell us. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Pamela.
I would be remiss if I didn't tell you guys just a little bit more about his background as well, because it's really interesting. Probably as much or more to me than anyone, because I'm getting brother vibes. Guys know how much I love my brother Paul, who was a Cobra pilot, colonel in the Marines. Well, over here we've got kind of the first of kin to that. That's the Apache pilot from the Army, where he did a remarkable job in Iraq. And I highly encourage you to watch the Apache Warriors documentary, which features a mission that he led. And he's also had many, many years in the Bureau of Land Management. He's worked in the private sector with Lockheed Martin. And that kind of begs the question of how the heck, after all of that really interesting stuff, did you end up deciding, you know what, I'm going to run for the U.S. House of Representatives in Wyoming, for Wyoming?
Well, I have a passion for public service. 27 years in the Army, being back here in Wyoming to serve the people of Wyoming and the BLM. I just truly enjoy doing that as a public servant. And now that I've had that opportunity in Wyoming to serve the people of Wyoming and the federal government, I'm passionate about wanting to take the things that I learned in the federal government and go to Congress and fix some of the things that I know will have a direct economic and beneficial result for the people of Wyoming.
I love that. And for those of you that are readers, you're hearing basically from the horse's mouth here. What motivates people to run? What's the kind of guy that gets in a writer's head and becomes the protagonist in their next military or political thriller? We hope politics isn't that thrilling for you, by the way, Kevin. But if you're a writer, also, it's the character study. It's a deep dive, right? And so when you look at most of your career, you were already answering a call to serve the people of the U.S., to serve the people of Wyoming before.
Well, when I went to the University of Wyoming, I got my degree in electrical engineering. I got my regular Army commission, and I also got my wife. And all three of those things, the wife, of course, being the most important, we embarked on 27 years together, 3 continents, 18 military moves, and we had 2 kids that we raised along the way, to include time where multiple combat tours in Iraq and other places where, the idea of service to your country is deep to me. My grandfather served in World War I. My dad was a Korean War veteran, and the opportunity to serve really came home to me, and realized not only am I good at it, I have such a passion for it that it became a career. And as that progressed, I just continued to want to do more of it.
Well, I heard a couple of things there. One is I heard it wasn't easy. 27 postings, 2 continents, and a couple of kids. So thank you to your wife for her service, as well as thank you for yours. I can tell you from my sister-in-law, having been in similar shoes, that I have a lot of appreciation for the partners, spouses, and family of people in the military. Their service they do without an oath, other than the oath to love their partner. So thank you for that. And also that it's something that it's just really hard to ever get out of your system once you answer that call to serve, that it becomes part of who you are.
It's so intrinsic to who I am. When I changed careers after I retired from the military, I took all that with me. And I really want to answer the question, if you are a good leader in combat and you take care of men and women and you're a compassionate leader, can you turn around and be successful in the business world with that? Can you turn around and enter public service on the federal government side? The answer is yes. And I encourage people, consider public service and consider time in the military as being part of your professional development to be the person that you can be, so that when you want to go on and take on all these other things, be a successful businessman, you're going to learn how to do that by being in the military.
And in fact, in an organization of immense size and complexity. I should go ahead and put this graphic up. If you guys don't forget who I'm talking about, but very quickly, let me also direct you, as we're talking, to go check out Kevin's website, and you can find information about him, his 2 golden retrievers, and how to volunteer and how to donate there. So it's Christensen2026.org. So that led you to, you said, private sector and to working within the federal sector. And I think I heard you say that both of them provided you with inspiration and lessons that led to your decision to run now. What kind of things did you encounter that made you say, I can take this one step further? I can go and represent the people.
I learned that good leaders build coalitions. When I was in war, I led a task force called Task Force Gunslinger. And it was the large aviation task force. I had coalition partners as part of my task force. And I learned that that's how you win in war. In government, you win the same way. You build relationships with people who see the same causes, who want to see work get done. I got involved because I sat back and I thought, Congress isn't getting work done. They can't get a budget done on time. And we have members of our Congress that come back and say, well, we can't get anything done because the other side is pure evil. They're not even worth talking to. And that's a cop-out.
Right.
Building coalitions with people who think differently than you, look differently than you do, is how you get things done. And that's the key work, is getting that work done, making the hard decisions.
It's interesting when you think about having neighbors. You and I don't have close neighbors where we live, but when you think about your nearest neighbor, you don't say, you know what, we can't figure out who's going to plow the road because we don't agree on, what we call ourselves. So we're just not going to plow it. This year we'll just all be snowed in together. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? So why would you cop out like that when it has to do with the important business of serving your country and doing the job you've been elected to do? So I appreciate hearing you say that. It makes me a little crazy what's going on with the lack of coalition building, because I think that that the things that affect us are largely the same. The things that we care about, we may have different ideas for solutions, but at the end of the day, we want very similar things.
And coalitions can be issue focused, not ideologically focused. We're not going to see the same on every possible issue or every possible topic. But on issue by issue, we can build coalitions of people who want to see things change. And if you look at our economy right now, we're seeing incredibly high cost of living. Healthcare is a great example of something that has to be addressed and get focused on. And if we don't build coalitions with like-minded people, some in the same party, some in a different party, then what we end up with is a general acknowledgement that it's not working for the people of America. But we're going to sit back and say, well, we just can't work with the other side because we don't like them. And that's not how our government was set up. If you look back at the history of Congress, there is a history of major bipartisan bills that form the basis of a lot of how our government functions today. But this current era, about 10 years or so ago, you have partisan only legislation that's getting passed, and it's getting passed by thin margins. And the other side is always going to resent when legislation gets crammed down their throat. And what's going to happen? When they get into power, they're going to pull it all back. And that is not good governance. When we build legislation that has bipartisan support, we know that it'll stand the test of time. It's not a waste of effort, and it's going to make a difference. I think that there's a number of great legislative examples that have served our country well with bipartisan support. The War Powers Act right now is an example of that needs to be revisited in Congress.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because this is just me, and everybody can have their own opinions, but I believe that we start first by honoring our Constitution, and that we move on from there to the powers granted within it and the ways in which it's restricted. And it doesn't feel like that's happening right now, that Congress is, from my perspective, abdicating their responsibility to enforce the laws as they are written.
That is a
Thoughts?
great example. So let's take a look at the current conflict in Iran. Clearly, the President of the United States is granted the power as Commander in Chief over the armed forces, but also clear in the Constitution, Congress has the power to declare war. And Congress passed a law during the Nixon administration over Nixon's veto, in fact, so strongly bipartisan support at the end of the Vietnam War was to provide restrictions on how wars are conducted when there is not a formal declaration by Congress. And that's where we're at right now. It's clear that we are still conducting acts of hostility in the area. We have
Right.
Navy ships that are conducting a blockade. Congress has to ask tough questions. We can be very much aligned or not aligned with the president, but we have to ask tough questions because wars cost a lot of money and it's affecting our economy in the country right now. And the members of Congress that represent their districts and their states should be asking, what exactly is our strategy? As a military advisor to the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and to the Deputy Secretary of Defense, I would not be able to articulate to anybody what our strategy is right now in Iran. We said it was unconditional surrender, regime change. It's about preventing the proliferation of nuclear weapons. Certainly, we can't allow Iran to have nuclear weapons. That is clear. But what we're doing right now is not really clear where we're at with regard to those objectives. And Congress has a role to play in that. And when Department of War comes back and throws a bill on Congress and says, well, you know, this conflict is really expensive, we need supplemental appropriation. Members of Congress should have said, that's what the War Powers Act was for.
Right. Now, you've had an interesting experience when it comes to understanding how budgetary items make it into bills and get passed, both from having worked on the federal side, but also in the private sector. Do you want to elaborate on that at all? Because I found it super interesting.
Well, you know, one of the things I did on the Joint Chiefs of Staff was advising the chairman, but also going to Congress, testifying before subcommittees and talking with members of Congress and usually their professional or committee staff on how a program is going, what the real costs, where things are at. And, you know, when the president is preparing the budget, it's about what capabilities that the federal government as a whole, not just on the military side, what is it that the federal government does? And when I worked on the private sector side, I realized that there were an enormous number of elected members of Congress who had absolutely no idea how Congress actually works. They didn't know where the money that's in a spreadsheet associated with the bill came from. They did not know where the money was even going to come from. And a lot of these elected members of Congress just show up and they vote yes or no on something. Most of them have not even read the legislation that's before the committee. And
That's not good.
no, it's not good. And it also makes it to where it is easy for some special interest groups to influence in a negative way what happens in Congress because they know how to go in and affect some of these committees and they can get to the people that will write these things in. And if nobody's reading the legislation, then when it comes up for vote, they're just casting a vote, yes or no, to move it on without really understanding what the implications and problems are.
And that becomes even more interesting when we become very partisan and vote, as many of them proclaim to do, because they're told to vote a certain way, because that's the vote they're being asked to give by their party. And it gets back to the idea of really representing the people, the people of Wyoming for the United States of America. It's why I'm so troubled right now that we don't see more pushback and activity from Congress. And like you said, more coalition building. It just shows not a lot of independent thinking and acting going on.
Well, one thing that I see from our Wyoming delegation is that it's whatever President Trump wants, President Trump gets. My view is when we're a state that gets one voice in the entire House of Representatives, that voice needs to know who it works for. And it
Right.
works for the people of Wyoming. You have to be loud. You need leadership that knows how to influence, someone who actually knows how Congress works. Now, after working there for 6 years, both from the Department of Defense side and then in the private sector, I know how it works. I know how to do that. And if you get one voice, that person you put there needs to be advocating for the things that we love in Wyoming. Everywhere I go, people talk about how public lands are important,
Right.
how the way that we love our state and its beauty. We want to make an honest living from the land, and federal land accounts for almost half of the land in Wyoming. So it means that we have to be very committed stakeholders to the stewardship of that land. In my time in the BLM, I learned just how much people truly care about that. So when you go to Congress, that one voice has to know what the people of Wyoming want. Not to say that that wouldn't align with President Trump from time to time, but when it doesn't, who do you work for? The people of Wyoming.
I love that. And, I love that you worked for BLM, because there couldn't be a job that's more in tune with the pulse, the heartbeat of what makes Wyoming Wyoming, which is, I'm looking out the windows here. No one else can see out my windows, but I feel like I'm looking out the window because Kevin's background, of course, is is a mountain. But I'm surrounded by BLM land where I live. Two sides. That's not really surrounded, but close. Two sides, BLM. And we treasure our ability to preserve that, and as you said, reasonably make a living around and with, etc. But it's all of ours, and it's been troubling to see that there are increasingly it's being used for purposes that run afoul of that, and that our representatives, our delegation, are voting to let that happen.
Well, one of the things, if you talk with people all across Wyoming, to include the people that visit Wyoming, tourism is now the number
Mhm.
2 industry in Wyoming. People come here because of that public land. They want to recreate on it. They want to hunt on it. Companies come here to develop minerals on it. Doing that responsibly towards our economic benefit of all the people, but also an eye towards the future, which is I want that land to be in at least as good of condition for the
Right.
next generation. I used to tell people when I took over that role, I felt like it was a sacred responsibility to know that if people came to Wyoming, they'd say, what mark did you make on it? How did you improve it? And so in my time with the BLM, I added land to the public domain and created access to a huge block of land, probably about 40, 50,000 acres that were inaccessible to the public by buying 36,000 acres. And it was powerful in that it not only creates access, it creates industry and opportunity. 8 miles of North Platte Riverfront property that can now have opportunities for recreation, where only before guides that were exclusive to the landowner could get in there. Now the public can get in there, and it's going to have a great economic benefit. We can develop oil and gas and coal. I permitted over 5,000 wells and mined 1.7 billion tons of coal out of the Powder River Basin. But what I'm really proud of is when those wells were done, they are reclaimed. Good luck in finding them if you go out to the field, because when on public land, I want it to be where you can't even tell, other than if we decide to retain a road for fire or public access, that you would know that it ever happened in there. Go to the reclaimed areas of our coal mines, and you'll see some of the best regrowth of vegetation. People think there's like this big hole in the ground. It's like some open pit, ugly looking thing. It's reclaimed. It's beautiful. The wildlife love it. And we as American people should be really proud of the fact that the stewardship of that land is taken so seriously and passionately by the people who have the responsibility to oversee it.
So, what I would wonder at this point, we've been talking for 20 minutes, and I never said what party you're with. If people know much about Wyoming, they know that a lot of seats are filled by one party. But when you're talking about stewardship paired with preservation for future generations, paired with economic development, paired with, enjoyment for the current generation, it's hard to tell which side you're talking to, right? I mean, this is where you get to the issues for a lot of us are congruent. Um, there are outliers. There are things we're going to argue about. To me, those are largely distractions from the things we care about that are similar. And in Wyoming, we care about our land. And as long as we as consumers are going to be driving the need for coal, fossil fuels, et cetera, the ability to produce them and then bring the land back to the condition it was in or better is being driven by us, right? And to do it responsibly is um, my heart makes my heart happy.
Well,
As I look at my BLM on two sides of my house.
we should be proud of our public lands, and we should also recognize that having responsible energy development with the right amount of conservation mixed in shouldn't be a partisan issue. It shouldn't matter whether you're
Right.
a Republican or Democrat. It should be that you just truly care about the people and the land. And I think that when you put that first, you can push the politics off to the side and say, what is best for the American people? We are all owners, not just the people in Wyoming. Everybody
Right.
is owners of that land. And when I would host public meetings, I did public meetings all over the state of Wyoming. And sometimes things that we did in the BLM would be a little bit controversial. And you would have people that would show up just spitting mad.
Right.
And I would say, you know what? I am as passionate about what you are passionate about as you are. I care. We might look at it in a slightly different way, but I want to fully understand where you stand on this, because it's my responsibility to manage it on behalf of everybody. And that's not just everybody who thinks like me, it's everybody who is a stakeholder. And that's why I would do it in Congress too, which is, I have to be able to represent everybody. That's Republicans, that's Democrats, and everybody in the spectrum in between. We're a beautiful state that has beautiful diversity in thought and in political views. We're heavily Republican, but even within the Republican spectrum, there's a lot of diversity within that. And my view is you can't just pick a side. I like this group of people over here in this little part of the political spectrum. So everything I do is going to be about that. The political spectrum is here. And when you're the one representative, you need to know that that's here.
Right. It's not this tiny slice. They're the smart ones that I'm going to make happy. And the rest of you,
go pound sand.
Go pound sand.
And I would just encourage voters to, only about half of the voting age population in Wyoming is registered to vote. Of that, probably less than half on a non-presidential election year are going to show up and vote. When you look at some of the things that are so critical in this election cycle, there's so much at stake within our state and within our nation that we're having that decided by about 25% of the population. And, I didn't grow up to be a politician, but now I realize for the things that matter to me, that matter to my family, that matter to the people of Wyoming, I have to be a politician. I can't be the person who says, you know what, somebody really ought to do something about that.
Yeah.
And that's why I got involved. Is that person I had the conversation with said, Kevin, why isn't that you? You have the experience. And I said, wow, that's like getting punched in the nose for a moment. I got to recover from that for just a minute. And I realized I'm not the guy who sits back and complains about things. I'm the guy that gets in there and says, all right, let's make a difference. Let's go get it done.
I can't tell you how I appreciate that. And to turn it back for a minute, we get a lot of people outside Wyoming that watch this show. We get a lot of people that may be thinking, why are we talking to a politician? And I want to tell you that 50% of my books are written based in the state of Wyoming. What you've heard Kevin just talk about here are issues that over and over appear in my books, that people kill over, that they fight over, that they, this is Wyoming, and these are the things that are important to us. So if you care about Wyoming, care about these books, or care about owning 43% of the state as United States stakeholders because of all of our federal land, is it 43% is federal,
About
something like that?
46, about
46.
46% if you take
Yeah.
out the Yellowstone National Park, and about 65% of the mineral wealth under that is owned. Back when homesteaders were coming across Wyoming and they were walking across on the California, the Mormon, the Oregon
Yeah.
trails, they had opportunities to settle at various places along the way. And in Wyoming, Wyoming at that time was looked at as a place where it's a get through state to
It's
get to where you're going, right?
in this season and as fast as you can.
Yeah. And so that's what, and so not a lot of people settle. That's why we have a lot of federal land, is that the rich soil of Nebraska and to the east, and then the destinations of Oregon and Utah and California were on the other side. Wyoming was viewed at the time as a place to get past. So a lot of the land was never claimed, and it was held in the federal government. Later on,
Interesting.
the federal government decided, instead of trying to dispose of all the land and put it into private ownership, what if it's one of the great American experiments. No other country really has this idea of public ownership of large amounts of land where we are all stakeholders in it. And I encourage people, if you're in Connecticut, I'm just picking Connecticut, you should care about Wyoming lands too, largely because those lands provide economic benefit to our country as a whole. The BLM, by way of example, is the second largest contributor to the US Treasury behind the IRS for the wealth of
Wow.
those public lands create. A lot of what our government is able to do for us comes from the wealth of deciding to retain. They could have given it all to private people who would have made a lot of money on it. That wealth would be in the hands of oil company barons and cattle barons and others. Today, that wealth is in the hands of you, the American people. So if you're in New York and you're in Florida, you're a real stakeholder in what happens in Wyoming.
I love that. And you think of how few people realize that, and yet how many still feel a sense of ownership and pride about Wyoming because they love to visit. They love Yellowstone. They love the Tetons. We hope they stay away from the Bighorns and Casper Mountain area because we like it a little less crowded. Um, but they love Wyoming. They come here to hunt. They come here to fish. They have family reunions here. They dream of vacations here all their life. Well, they also have been being supported in some of the things their government does for them and that they've needed their whole lives by like you said, that great experiment that's here that we're all so proud of. And I can see why people love Wyoming. I grew up in Buffalo, just south of here, not quite halfway between you and me, Kevin. But there's just something about this place that gets in your heart, and I appreciate that. As many 27 different, locations in your military service, all the time you spent in DC, that your heart still stayed with Wyoming, and that it beat strong enough for it that here you are throwing yourself into the fray. So
Well,
thank you.
when you're raised here and you grow up the culture, values, and traditions of what it means to be a Wyomingite. And then to go out and, yeah, as a young man, I was dying to get out and go see the world, go out, fly Apache attack helicopters,
Yeah.
see the world. And one of the biggest revelations that I had as I saw the world, and I lived in other cultures, and I had the opportunity to meet with so many different people all around our country. We have a wonderful, wonderful thing here in Wyoming. It's worth living here, it's worth loving, and it's worth protecting.
Now, Kevin, I've got to say that when people ask me about moving to Wyoming, what I tell them is it's closed. I say it's closed. You might check out North Dakota or Nebraska. They both are taking or accepting applications, but I'm just kidding. We love this state, and we can see what other people do too.
Well, it's comical. I came across on this website, and I can't remember where it was at. It was a guide for Californians on how to move to Wyoming, and it was a guide on how to move to Wyoming. And so I opened this up and I started reading on it. And it shows maps, it shows everything on how to get here, where to live, and it has roads, and they're all going to Colorado. And it says, "Welcome to Larimer County, Wyoming." And I thought it was great. It was
It is.
basically a big joke, which was, "Hey, I think you'd like it here." And it's got a little part in there. It says, "Hey, whatever you do, don't go north. Just once you get here, just stay here. You're going to love it here." So we tend to love and laugh a little bit about Wyoming. We love people to come out and visit with us and enjoy the things that we feel are so special about our state. We also want to protect our way of life. We also like the fact that we're the least populated state in the
Yes.
union. And Wyoming is one big small town with really long roads. And if you just understand that, that's what Wyoming is.
I love it. I love it. That's perfect. I appreciate you coming on so much. I learned a lot. I'm going to go do some reading now on the history of how our land stayed in the hands of the people, because I was missing that piece of where that started, and I think that's good fodder for books here.
And great stories to tell. I encourage
Yeah,
people, come to the National Historic Trails Interpretive Center in Casper. You can
cool.
learn about, I mean, essentially what you have coming through Casper, Wyoming, is the largest unforced migration in human history. Occurred right here through Wyoming. All the trails came through Casper, Wyoming. Then they kind of
Right.
went their separate ways. It's an incredible story about how our country came to be, but it's also about how the land became owned by the people, and also where the areas where it was retained by the federal government. And you can, if you come through, go stop there, because you can learn a lot about our history here.
I have some books to buy. I can already tell you this. Well, you guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope you learned some things as well and left inspired. I will catch you next time on the next chapter podcast. And in the meantime, go check out Kevin's website. He's running for the U.S. House of Representatives in Wyoming for 2026, and you can learn more about him there. Thank you, guys.